Welcome back to Lecture 12. We are at Part 2, and we're still in New York, New York. Remember, that becomes the art capital after the end of World War II. And not only are we in the art capital, we are in the 1960s, when New York really lays claim to that title of being the art capital. And it's pretty much due to this guy right here we've been looking at, Clement Greenberg. That's when his art criticism and art theory really comes to the fore. He defined what modernism was all about. He had said that modernism was headed towards flatness. Right? Remember that? The road to modernism is flat. And we saw the beginning of modernism, at least according to Greenberg, with realism / Manet, which is his painting on the left, which compared to academic art, like the one on the right, Manet's paintings seemed washed out and flat. And Greenberg said, well, that's the beginning of modernism, because there's this irresistible urge to flatten the image in the avant-garde modernist painting. Another key that Greenberg pointed out to be modernism is modernist painting is heading towards non-representation. That too we've seen. And we saw the start of non-objective painting, non-representational painting in the early 20th century with German Expressionism on the left there, Kandinsky work, and geometric abstraction, Mondrian's style, on the right. And that continued, that trend of modernist painting towards non-representational continued into what we just left, abstract expressionism, both branches. Now there's a third element, and that's more of a key to understanding Greenberg's theory on modernism. He said modernist painting is headed towards a purification and, by extension, a perfection. So the three key elements: flatness, key elements of modernism in painting, is flatness, non-representational, and purification. Let's look at that term, that concept, purification. Here's a point I've made before. Starting in the late 19th century, there was this idea kicking around that before a painting was a warhorse, a nude woman, or a painted scene, it was first and foremost paint on a flat surface. And that concept really got off the ground with Cubism, which shattered the Albertian window. Painting was no longer an extension of our reality seen through a window, but rather it embraced the reality of a painting, flat surface covered in pigment. Well, now, in the time of Greenberg in the 1960s, that thought, that premise really came to blossom. Purification in the head of Greenberg meant that a painting referred only to itself. It was entirely self-referential. It did not bring to the attention of the viewer anything outside of itself, like a horse, a lady, or a tree, because that was a contamination to the purification of a painting. A painting had to be first and foremost flat. It could not have like a sculptural quality, like raised brushstrokes that belonged in the realm of sculpture. It could not represent the natural world because that would be referring the viewer to something other than what a painting was, namely paint on a flat surface. So you eliminate all of those contaminations, all of those elements outside of a very strict definition of what a painting is, and then you have a purification. Purification in Greenberg's art criticism, mainstream art criticism during the 1960s, purification equaled perfection, that is, the perfected painting, a perfection of the art of painting. So during the 1960s, painting strove for a self-definition, a self-purification. It was strictly a painted surface with no reference outside of itself, which meant a war on the gesture. The gesture, the paint stroke, the energetic, expressive paint stroke was one of the defining elements to that one branch of abstract expressionism, the gestural branch or action painting. But now the gesture was outlawed because of its implications that were now foreign to the dominating art criticism of the 1960s. A gesture implied, well, a hand, right, that made the gesture, the movement of the hand that produced the path of the gesture. And the argument is, well, what does a hand have to do with a painting? A hand is clearly outside the animal of painting. And also because the gesture is so expressive, so emotional, that too brought in contamination. What do human feelings and psychology and all of the mental package that humans have, what does that have to do with a purified, perfected painting? Well, nothing. So they eliminated the gesture. Right, purification, anything that was contaminating the most strict definition of a painting, paint on a flat surface, was eradicated from the painting process. Now, all of that famously produced during the 1960s, this mainstream art criticism of the 1960s, produced an umbrella movement called post-painterly abstraction. Post means after, and painterly, we know, means showing evidence of brushwork. It's not linear, but it's painterly. It's all about the expressive application of paint. But now, post-painterly abstraction is moving away from that expressive gestural phase of modernism, abstract expressionism, and going into a more purified phase of non-representational painting, abstraction, post-painterly abstraction. And it produced actually three movements, but sub-movements, but we're going to look at two of them. One is called hard edge painting, which is famous, and then maybe even more famously, there is a third leg called minimalism. All right, so we've been seeing this image, well, that image right there, all semester long. What is that about? That is an example of hard edge. And that's what we're going to take a look at. It's by Ellsworth Kelly. That's a painting. And according to Greenberg and other art critics during the 1960s, this painting and its movement, hard edge, represented the ultimate purification, hence perfection of the art of painting. And we're going to try to understand their thought process enough to see what they saw that was important about the movement. Well, why is it called hard edge? You can get up closer and you can see how this stuff was made. You take masking tape, for the most part, and you just simply apply it to the canvas. And then you get a brush and you apply paint alongside the masking tape. There's my green paint going in. And then you remove the tape, and you have a very crisp, defined edge, hence the term hard edge painting. And it is meant to look machine clean, machine made, perfectly flat. No gesture, no visible brushstroke, no indication that a human hand or a human emotion went into the production of this painting. It looks stamped out. The human role was almost entirely removed, at least from the appearance of the painting. Look at the painting. The colors, this is probably a quiz question, the colors are very harsh, very commercial. They're not natural or organic. The reason why for the harsh commercial coloration is because, a sky blue or grass green might reference the viewer to nature, and that was forbidden, totally avoided. We wanted to look at the flat paint on the flat canvas and think of nothing outside of that existence. And remember, we were looking at the color-filled example of abstract expressionism by Barnett Newman, and he did this huge painting called Vir Heroicus Sublimus, Sublime Heroic Man. And even though the two painting styles look similar, although hard edge is much crisper and the colors are more severely commercial, the title of Ellsworth Kelly's painting really brings the decided difference between these two works in focus. So Barnett Newman up top is trying to express the heroicism, the sublimity of the human nature. What is Kelly trying to express? Let's see what his title is, okay? The title is simply Red, Blue, Green, because that is, in its entirety, the subject of the painting. And look, there's not even a comma or a conjunction like and in the title. It's exactly what you see is exactly what the artist wants you to think about, and nothing beyond that. That title encapsulates the entire existence and quality of the painting. And look at the title. We first see red when we look at this huge painting. This too is a huge painting. Because red is a warm color and it jumps out and slaps us in the face. So we see it first, so it's listed first. After the red, we see the blue because it's a large blob there on the canvas. And then finally, almost like it's a background, we see the color green. In other words, Kelly, and also post-painterly abstraction, is letting the paint do the talking. The paint is simply there, existing as a flat surface on the canvas, and that is the entire subject, and that is all we're supposed to be thinking about, and the artist sort of steps back and allows us to focus on the sheer essence of the painted surface. Red, green, blue. Now, if you go back and look at all the non-representational painting we've been looking at, and certainly hard edge painting is non-representational, I've been stressing that previous examples, movements, had a spiritual, emotional, and or psychological content to their work. But look, in the 1960s, that was a thing of the past. Now it is all about the purification of color on a flat surface. There is absolutely no spiritual, emotional, psychological content to this post-painterly abstraction. It's only a work of art and nothing more, nothing outside of the picture frame. Hey, here's another Ellsworth Kelly. Could you tell? Yeah, and look at the title. Blue, green, yellow, orange, red. Again, there's no commas, no conjunction. But I want to bring out something here. Look, right there is a rectangle, happens to be blue. There's another one. Yeah, you got a whole series of these rectangular colored shapes. This is an example of modular units. The modular unit, the proportioned size of an form, of an image, is repeated and they become interchangeable. And listen, the modular unit becomes a mainstay in the aesthetics of modernism and is not just used in hard edge or post-painterly abstraction. From the 1960s on, it really becomes an aesthetic component of the art that we in America are used to or accustomed to seeing. When you have these repeated modular units, it's called modular painting. Or if it's sculpture, it's modular sculpture. And look, the whole idea is they are interchangeable. Look at this. I can just flip this around a bit and move it up there, and it really does look like the same painting for all intents and purposes. So their modular unit is an interchangeable part in the composition of a painting. All right, let's stop here, and in part 3, we will look at minimalism, another phase of post-painterly abstraction.